My name is Emma Gould, and I am a senior at Amy Beale Charter High School. For my senior project, I worked as a volunteer advocate at the Rape Crisis Center of Central New Mexico and spent 103.5 hours attending the training and learning about sexual assault, answering the 24-hour hotline, and working on formatting and adding sources to the resource guide for providing information to survivors of sexual assault. Amy Beale is dedicated to the community and preparing us for understanding and battling inequality and injustice in the world. We have a passion for helping our fellow human beings and for making the world a better place. I started out my project passionate about helping survivors of sexual violence despite their gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, cultural background, or personal beliefs. While I still retain that desire to help people, I have often felt, in the silence when no one calls and I am waiting to pick up the phone, that my efforts are inadequate. In the grand scheme of things, what have I really done? 1 in 4 women will experience rape or attempted rape in her lifetime, and 1 in 20 men will experience rape or attempted rape in his. Answering phone calls is dedicated to serving survivors of sexual assault and their family members and getting them the resources and attention they need. It's incredibly important. Advocates answer the 24-hour hotline and attend SANE cases. When a survivor decides to go to SANE, an acronym for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners, for an exam, it has to be within 5 days of the assault. A volunteer advocate and a SANE nurse will meet them at the Albuquerque Family Advocacy Center downtown after they have made their appointment and escort them through security. While I was trained to be a hospital advocate, not long after I started my shifts, volunteers were switched to hotline only because the Rape Crisis Center was getting more calls than SANE cases. I did, however, get to shadow a case with a staff advocate before that happened, so I have first-hand experience in assisting survivors through SANE exams. The first part of the appointment is the interview. I think for me, this was the hardest part. But while it may be hard for me, it must be 10 times more difficult for the survivor. The client proceeds to tell the SANE nurse and the advocate about the assault, so the nurse knows where to collect evidence in the exam, if the survivor chooses to let the SANE nurse do so. The entire process is the survivor's decision, which is the volunteer advocate's job to remind both the survivor and the nurse of. A survivor can get either the full exam, which entails collecting evidence of the assault and STI and pregnancy prevention, or the partial, which is just the administering of the treatment. And the survivor can pick and choose which part of the partial or full exam that they want. Depending on trauma sustained, sometimes there is very little evidence to collect. One of the subjects I had to learn about during training was child sexual abuse. Occasionally, a SANE exam will be done with a child who has been assaulted. While the Rape Crisis Center for the most part doesn't deal with survivors under the age of 13, usually CYFD, the Children, Youth, and Family Department of New Mexico, is the organization who handles child abuse, there have been cases brought into SANE that involve children. Because of this, we were required to learn about child sexual abuse and the individuals who perpetrated these acts. It was a very difficult topic, especially because the speaker who was brought in had to go into detail about what happens during the assaulting of the child. One of the things I remember with frustrating clarity is what she said to the advocates in training. The perpetrator doesn't want to hurt or bruise the child because signs that show are more obvious, and when these things are noticed, they can't do what they want to anymore. It felt like she was putting us in the perpetrator's head, in their perspective. It made me feel like throwing up. That day, I drew 2 pictures resembling the emotional impact that lecture had on me. If the survivor chooses to have an advocate come into the room during the exam, the advocate's job is to keep the survivor's mind on the present. During an exam, sometimes the survivor can be re-traumatized if their wishes are not being met or if they are thinking about the assault while the nurse is collecting evidence. Finally, after the evidence is collected and all of the paperwork is filled out, the survivor may want to file a police report. The evidence of the assault is kept in a room at SANE for up to 1 year, and a survivor can make a report up to 5 years after the assault. There are many reasons why a survivor may not want to make a report, so that does not always happen. It was my job as an advocate to validate their decisions and support them, no matter what choice they made. It wasn't always the easiest thing to do, especially if I thought they should do something different. But the thing I was constantly reminding myself of was that it was not my decision. I was not in their place, and I had no right to tell them what to do. Far too many people tried to control the decisions of sexual assault survivors already, and my purpose as a volunteer advocate was to give them that power back, not take it away. But what I really want to do, after I've listened to a survivor's story, after they've told me that they've been assaulted and that they are afraid or angry or sad, I want to don a superhero's costume and mask, dip myself into a vat of radioactive waste, or trip and fall into a high-voltage, chemically changing science experiment, and then with a freshly genetically mutated superpower run off and arrest their perpetrators. I want to be their avenger. I want to make sure that they know that the person who hurt them will never do that to them or anyone else again. As it is now, I do feel as if I am making a difference, just not one quite as immediate or dramatic. When people call the line or come into an appointment at the Family Advocacy Center for a sexual assault exam, many of them seem almost dead inside. They have just been assaulted in a society that is more likely to blame them than the person who did this to them. Oh, you were out too late. Oh, you shouldn't have been drinking. You're in a relationship. Why are you considering it rape? They have a right to sex. Many people will blame the survivor for what happened to him or her, not the person who actually assaulted them. With child sexual abuse, some will go as far to say that children were acting sexual and seduced the perpetrator. When I hear these statements, my mind goes cold. And not just ice cube from the freezer cold, more like a block of frozen carbon dioxide from Jupiter's moon Europa cold. This is my deepest form of anger, and it's something I've had to rein in and push down, hiding it under barricades and shields of control. Sometimes I'll need to release it, but not during my advocacy work. It's not my job to be angry. My job as a volunteer advocate was to be a voice in the survivor's favor. I support the survivors' decisions after informing them of their options and provide a stable emotional anchor for them. In a way, I feel like I was a gatekeeper to the knowledge that would guide them to their paths of healing. And after I help them, after their SANE exam, or after I've given them a resource or just listened as they told me what happened and how they felt, and given them empathy, there is something seemingly restored to the way they speak, act, walk. They still have a long way to go in terms of healing, but they look better, maybe happier. They've taken some power over themselves back, taken steps to restore who they were before the assault. Sometimes I lose faith in the human race when I think about the things our species has done, what it continues to do. But then I remember that there are people like my mentor, Michaela Garcia. Throughout my entire senior project, my mentor Michaela supported me. She is the volunteer coordinator at the Rape Crisis Center of Central New Mexico. When my shift started, I came in once a week to talk to her. She always made sure that I was doing well emotionally. Working with her was a wonderful experience, and I am so happy that I got a mentor who supported me, set aside time to help me, and made sure that I would meet all the requirements for my senior project. She took an interest in my research paper on sexual assault rates in New Mexico too, and helped to set up interviews with 2 different members of the Rape Crisis Center staff who were very informative sources. Just interacting with her was also fun. While she was still my mentor, she was also my friend. She would explain to me examples of some situations I might encounter while working, and prepare me for some of the emotional impact. I couldn't have picked a better place to have my senior project. While it could be emotionally trying, it was also emotionally strengthening. Working at the Rape Crisis Center helped me to take steps towards becoming the person I want to be. I admire Michaela and Kate, and the people who work at the Rape Crisis Center full-time. Being able to interact directly with survivors and help them heal is, I think, one of the noblest things in the world. They've dedicated their lives to helping survivors and educating people in our community, and in my eyes, that's the equivalent of fighting in a war to protect others. By battling injustice every day peacefully, they make our world a better place. That they can do this and not lose heart is truly admirable. If I was asked who some of the most positively influential people in my life are, Michaela and the people who work at Rape Crisis Center, staff and volunteers, would be at the top of that list. It was an honor to work with them, and I will carry what they taught me, their selflessness, their passion, their true empathy for others, and their love for their fellow humans, onto my future life.